Well, until the hostages come home. Okay, well, how about we redouble our efforts to get the hostages home, if that's the impediment to peace? Because it seems like there have been a lot of side quests and side missions.
But the real plot twist, Michael, those side missions, the side quests that you just mentioned there, are the mission.
Disrupt America,
Weird thing to happen. Alrighty, so calling the segment, you know you're losing the battle when. Another key prominent Zionist promoter or a pro-Israel voice is looking at the other light, has finally opened the door, pulling back the curtain, because after Israel announced the attack they did on a Catholic church in Gaza, claiming it's a mistake, Michael Knowles, who has been a predominant voice for Daily Wire, another promoter of the Zionist Israel project, know why Ben Shapiro is one of them, but Michael Knowles is another. He's starting to call things out. So you've lost Piers Morgan, you're losing predominant people in the media sphere, and now you're losing people like Michael Knowles because of these instances, these so-called mistakes, that now people are opening and raising eyebrows to speculate on whether or not Israel has the true intentions that they claim, that they're defending themselves from, October 7th Hamas and that narrative that we've heard numerous times before. So this guy, Liam McCullum, says, wow, is Israel losing American Christians? Michael Knowles on the bombing of the only Catholic church in Israel. So here's what he says.
Speaking of church, we turn now from Muslims to Christians. Horrible story out of Gaza. Horrible story. The IDF has struck the only Catholic church in Gaza. According to the reporting, 10:20 a.m. yesterday, the compound of the Holy Family in Gaza, which belongs to the Latin Patriarch, was struck by the Israeli army. 3 people died from their injuries. 9 others were wounded, including one in critical condition, and the priest, the parish priest, Father Gabriel Romanelli, was also injured. This is the line from the Latin Patriarch. The Latin Patriarchate, which is the Catholic Church in Gaza, the Latin Patriarchate strongly condemns this tragedy and this targeting of innocent civilians and of a sacred place. So Israel came out later on after international outcry, including from the White House. Israel came out and said, it was a mistake. It was an accident. Was it an accident? I don't see any evidence that it was an accident. Can you provide me some proof that it was an accident? You struck the church. Churches are pretty obvious targets. They're pretty obvious sites. There's certain features, the cross, steeple, are pretty obvious.
It's literally amazing that Israel can get away with this many mistakes. So they claim so many mistakes. And yet still we're forking money left, right, and center for these many mistakes. Oh, we didn't realize that residential building was going to have a bunch of innocent civilians when we blew it up. Oh, we didn't realize that school had a bunch of children when we blew that up. Oh, we didn't realize the hospital had patients in there in critical need that we blew that up. Oh, we didn't realize, the Central World Kitchen was actually feeding people innocent lives that had nothing to do with Hamas when we blew them up. Like, how many mistakes can Israel commit before people start waking up to realize these aren't mistakes? These are deliberate attacks. They knew from the get-go, but the whole intention is to go after and target and do a complete wipeout, or in really a case of genocide, wipe out this entire population. That is what a genocide is. They want to completely annihilate and destruct anything that goes against the greater Israeli project, goes against the Zionist prophecy, and they will target anyone that stands in their way. And this is proof of it. This also proves that the Palestinian state is not just an Arab country that hates Jewish people. No, there's Jewish people, there's Catholics, there's Christians. It's very secular. It's actually very secular. And it's so secular that Israel attacking Palestinian people is actually anti-Semitic. You know why? Because Palestinians are Semites. So what they're doing is actually anti-Semitism, while pointing the finger at the rest of the world, including international courts that are calling this out and claiming they're anti-Semitic. The irony does not fall far from this.
Explain to me how this was an accident. Haven't heard that. The Latin Patriarch seems to think it was intentional. The targeting of innocent civilians, not just a stray bullet, the targeting. And he goes on, he says, however, this tragedy is not greater or more terrible than the many others that have befallen Gaza. Many other innocent civilians have also been harmed, displaced, and killed. Death, suffering, and destruction are everywhere. This horrific war must come to a complete end so that we may commence the long work of restoring human dignity. Diane Montagna, who's a great reporter on the Vatican and Rome and the Pope, says His Holiness renews his call for an immediate ceasefire. So this is talking about Pope Leo. He expresses his profound hope for dialogue, reconciliation, and enduring peace in the region. And then The Pillar, which is a Catholic outlet, says sources close to the Patriarchate's chancery told The Pillar Thursday that some officials believe the strike could have been a deliberate act of retaliation after Christian leaders recently condemned Israeli settler attacks on a West Bank Christian town. Now, I want you to put a bar. First of all, we pray for the dead and for this Christian community, but put a bar there for a second. There's another story coming out, which is that Mike Huckabee, as strong a supporter as the state of Israel as there is, U.S. ambassador to the state of Israel. According to the Times of Israel, Mike Huckabee is threatening to declare Israel not welcoming to Christians as a visa fight blows open. Penned a scathing letter to the interior minister, accusing Israel of blocking Christian groups from entering Israel and threatening reciprocal steps against Israeli visa seekers. As I've mentioned before, everyone seems to hate the state of Israel these days, mostly coming from the left, but some people on the right have joined. And I've been broadly supportive of the state of Israel, not really as an ideological matter, but as a matter of prudence. And you're losing me. You're losing me. When you strike churches, the only church in Gaza, even if accidentally, but especially if not accidentally, you're losing me. If you're losing Mike Huckabee, the Israeli government is really screwing up, is really not playing its cards right. If Trump, I think the press secretary yesterday said Trump was furious, Trump was angry, not the exact word, but he was quite dismayed to hear about this attack on the church. I agree with the Holy Father. I agree with the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, and I agree especially with the Holy Father on most matters. The war needs to come to an end. There need to be political consequences for this action, and the war needs to come to an end. How long is the war going to go on? I know what the answer is. The answer is, well, until the hostages come home. Okay, well, how about we redouble our efforts to get the hostages home, if that's the impediment to peace? Because it seems like there have been a lot of side quests and side missions going in, the Iran nuclear facilities, maybe potentially regime change in Iran, occupying southern Syria. It seems like there have been a lot of distractions. The war has been going on.
But the real plot twist, Michael, which is the whole reason for this entire dilemma, those side missions, the side quests that you just mentioned there are the mission. That is the mission. The side quest is actually whether or not we save the hostages. Because the IDF, the Israeli government, Netanyahu have all confirmed that they're not in highest priority of saving the hostages. They had numerous times to deal with Hamas and do an exchange. They had every opportunity to save the hostages. They rather keep them in captivity as leverage to keep this going. That's why they're continuously ignoring their own civilians. The Netanyahu government is ignoring the state of Israel as their people are even calling for peace. They're the ones that want to stop this war also. And Netanyahu does not want this war to stop. And I shouldn't even say a war. It's a genocide. Because the Palestinian people are defenseless. They have no way to retaliate. They've been occupied for so long, starved and drenched out for so long. And this is all intentionally done to, again, serve the need of the greater Israeli project and the Zionist cult, death cult prophecy. That's what all this is. And I know it's going to take some time for Michael Knowles to finally sink that in, but I'm glad that he's willing to admit this. I'm glad that he's willing to finally come to terms now that one of his own is part of the targets. Now to realize that, no, it's not specific people, that everybody's got a target on their back. If you're not complicit 100% to this death cult cause, you are a problem. You are a problem, and they will deal with you. Hence why they attacked a Catholic church, not by mistake, but for intended purposes.
For almost 2 years. When's it going to end? Just what's the end of it? Can anyone tell me that? When the hostages are released? Well, then focus on getting the hostages released. Well, no, when Hamas is totally destroyed. Okay, well, when's that going to be? When Iran is no longer funding terrorism? When's that going to be? When Syria is made safe for democracy? When? Give me an answer. Because the war cannot just go on.
So you think, listing off those arguments, it again doesn't take rocket science to clue this in, folks. Because if someone like me can figure this out, then someone like him can figure this out too. You just claimed, well, I want this war to end. Well, they claimed that we can't end the war until we save the hostages. Okay, well, let's save the hostages. Well, we can't until we eliminate Hamas. Okay, let's do that. Well, we can't do that until we... Do you see how they're changing the goalpost? You see how they continuously change the goalpost? Just like every other conflict of war we've done post-World War II. Remember the invasion of Iraq? Remember the going into Afghanistan? Oh, we got to stop Saddam Hussein. Oh, we got to stop Osama bin Laden. Okay, he's confirmed dead. That's the big announcement. You got him. All right. So are we going to pull the troops out? Well, not really. Because now we got to deal with the Taliban. Okay. Well, when are we going to get out of there? Exactly. And when we did eventually leave Afghanistan, not everybody, they still want to put troops there. They still want to occupy and control because the opium and other minerals that are there. When they did actually left, they left behind the weapons to the terrorists. Why? So that they have an excuse to go back. So this is all intentional. This is all intentional. And Michael Knowles, I know it's going to take some time. And I'm going to give credit to him. I'm going to give a bit of credit to him for at least opening his mind a tiny, tiny bit, giving the door a little bit of a jar there to understanding this. But that is exactly the point, that they're going to keep moving the goalposts. They're going to keep coming up with excuses to keep this going. And the other reason that they're keeping this going, which is not being revealed through the mainstream lens, but also another thing to note, is that Netanyahu is facing criminal prosecution with his own crimes in his own state of corruption, of bribery, of scandals. So he has to keep this going because the more war, the more catastrophic damages, the more we have to defend our nation, the more of an excuse that he won't be tried and prosecuted. Because he's in the middle of a war. You can't prosecute someone that is in the middle of a deadly war outbreak. We can't prosecute someone now. That's also why. So they want to keep this going as much as possible. And they, the Israeli IDF and the governments, the war powers that be, the military-industrial complex, anyone that's backing them, will keep this going as long as it takes. And to lose predominant people that for years that they've tried to entrench, that they tried to indoctrinate, Right now, they're trying to send more influencers on a round trip to Israel, for God's sakes, to try to indoctrinate them. They're losing this argument so badly. And here is Michael Knowles again, doubling down. So he made a statement beforehand. Now he's doubling down on if Mike Huckabee and I are the enemies of the state of Israel, then Israel doesn't have any friends. So he's really going full on scorched earth for against Israel. Well, let's see what happens.
Very strange situation going on right now between the United States and Israel. U.S. and Israel, usually very close allies, officially, of course, still allies, but tensions are mounting. You're seeing a lot of shade getting thrown between the White House and the administration broadly and the state of Israel. On the heels of the Israeli attack on the only Catholic church in Gaza, which killed 3 Christians, injured 10, including the priest, on the heels of that, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who is extremely pro-Israel, Mike Huckabee threatened to accuse Israel of being unwelcoming to Christians because apparently evangelical groups in America are having trouble getting visas. On the heels of all of that, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, has called a recent Israeli settler attack on a Palestinian church in the West Bank an act of terror. This was an attack that ended up with the death of a Palestinian American who is apparently a Christian. So this Huckabee actually went to visit the Christian town of Taba, where Israeli settlers reportedly started a fire near a cemetery in a 5th century church back on July 8th. Huckabee said, "It is an act of terror and it is a crime. Those who carry out acts of terror and violence in Taba or anywhere should be found and prosecuted, not just reprimanded. That's not enough. A little apology, a little whoopsie-daisy, a little slap on the wrist, not enough, according to the U.S. ambassador to Israel. They need to be prosecuted for their crimes." The Israeli government has not commented on this incident, but has a habit of denouncing these kinds of attacks. Huckabee saying, you got to do more than denounce it. You got to go hard against these people. He's asked Israel to, quote, aggressively investigate the killing of this Palestinian American who was beaten to death by Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Says it's a criminal and terrorist act. What makes this strange, what makes even my commentary on this strange from last week is Huckabee is a big defender of Israel and even of Israeli settlements, according to reporting. And yet he says this is completely outrageous. So I discussed the IDF attack on Friday, I guess it was Thursday or Friday. And I caught a bunch of flack from extremely pro-Israel activists. A bunch of flack. I mean, all the crazy insinuations. You're abandoning Israel. You're anti-Semitic or something. Completely lunatic stuff. And my reaction to that is, if Mike Huckabee and I are the enemies of the state of Israel, then Israel doesn't have any friends. Doesn't have a single friend on planet Earth. And this is a big problem. These 3 incidents, all in rapid succession, pose a big, big problem for the Israeli government. Because what you hear, the typical talking points in propaganda, if you call out the attack on the church, which the state of Israel says was accidental, maybe it was accidental, maybe it was a mistake, but it was a big mistake. If it was a mistake, it was a big mistake. Actually, either way, you would say it was a big mistake. The Latin Patriarch in Jerusalem doesn't seem totally convinced it was a mistake. The Holy Father has condemned the attack repeatedly and called for peace and an end to the war. The typical response, the talking points is, well, you're condemning an Israeli attack on a church, or you're condemning Israeli settler attacks on a Christian community in the West Bank, but why aren't you talking about the Muslim attacks on Christians? And there are some people who are pathologically opposed to Israel or who don't like the Jews or something, who don't talk about Muslim attacks on Christians. But that ain't me, and that ain't Mike Huckabee, and that ain't a lot of the people who are seriously concerned about these attacks in recent days. I think if I had a nickel for every time on this show that I've mentioned the battles of Poitiers, Lepanto, and Vienna, or any other number of Muslim attacks on Christians going back 1,300 years all the way to the present, if I had a nickel for that, I think I could buy a fleet of private jets.
You might need those nickels when, Ben Shapiro unfortunately cancels his show. Because that is something else for the Daily Wire. It's kind of amazing that for a supposed outsider podcast network that promotes nothing but the Zionist talking points, pro-war talking points, it's amazing that they could still bankrupt themselves. And is that a miracle? That the Daily Wire that uses verbatim talking points directed from the CIA to Mossad to just promoting the war propaganda, the war machine, it's sounding exactly like mainstream media, still has the ability to bankrupt itself. That is amazing, folks. That's amazing that could happen. And it's also a miracle that one of its predominant voices, Michael Knowles, and in some cases Mike Huckabee, they're losing control of the argument. And it's really put this on notice. So here's from the Hill. Israel's Gaza church strike sparks moral debate. Is it losing support from its strongest U.S. allies? Well, we know that Piers Morgan recently did a 180 and has maybe seen the light. I don't know, again, if it's for career purposes or not. I'm glad that he's at least, looking at the other side of the argument. You got Michael Knowles now. You got Mike Huckabee. You got very predominant people that, did not want to talk about this or are full-on supporters of the state of Israel, are now condemning these actions because they know that it's hurting the cause. It's hurting the cause, to have the state of Israel, especially knowing that Israel is not only attacking innocent children in Palestine, which already is horrendous, the attacks that they do on Gaza, the brutalization they do on Palestinian people. Not only that, but they're attacking their own civilians. We're seeing people beaten up on the streets. We're seeing the attacks of people, if you're not supportive of this Zionist death cult regime, that you will be ostracized, that you are not part of our society. They, go after Jewish people who survived the Holocaust, who are actual Holocaust survivors, denouncing this. They go after them. So they are doing this to themselves. They are doing this to themselves. The state of Israel is losing the battle of control, the battle of narrative control, and it's losing its argument to keep defending the state of Israel because they claim that it's defending Jewish people. Well, if you're attacking Jewish people and you're attacking Holocaust survivors that are pointing this out, that are saying attacking churches and innocent lives of children and mass slaughtering them at humanitarian sites, then it's not helping the cause of keeping this state of Israel alive. But as pointed out by people like RFK Jr., it's like an aircraft carrier. That's what it is. The state of Israel has nothing to do with Jewish people, has nothing to do with any notion of stability or peace in the Middle East. It has to do with the fact that Mossad, the CIA, the MI6, the powers that be, the entire oligarchy needed to have some grounding point directly in Middle Eastern territory so they can have eyes and ears of all the surrounding areas. And that's why strategically it is placed right on Palestinian soil. Strategically, to keep eyes and ears and tabs on all the other surrounding nations. And they are losing the argument to say that it's a safe space for Jewish people, because what they're doing now, not only attacking their own Jewish people, but killing these Palestinians is anti-Semitic. So here's Alan McLeod of Mid-Press News pointing this out. Worship at the Holy Family Catholic Church in Gaza is interrupted by Israeli missile strike. How many more churches and mosques will Israel destroy? So this is video proof of the targeted attacks that they did to this church. As Michael Knowles pointed out, you can't even really call it a mistake when you know it is directly a Catholic church. I mean, the cross is right there. It looks like a church. It's got the steeple. It's the chapel. It's not that hard to figure out, folks. But they did it anyway. They did it anyway. And here's just some of the footage here. So, church filled with innocent people being attacked, and they call it a mistake. Here's suppressed news. Breaking, another IDF strike against St. Porphyrius, is that how you say Porphyrius Orthodox Church in Gaza, resulting in multiple injuries. Christians, Israel will target you too. Wake up. Exactly. This is what's making people realize this. This is the red flag that's finally getting people to sink in, to understand that this isn't about defense. That all the narrative you have heard before is manufactured. They did this intentionally, just like how they told you about how we need to invade Iraq, how we need to go in Afghanistan, how we need to overthrow Libya, how we need to do all these, deadly detonations of countries because we're, protecting democracy or saving the people or it's humanitarian causes. It's all crap. It is all crap. It is all to fulfill this prophecy of either Zionism or the military-industrial complex in their great conquest to conquer the world and use dead bodies as capital. That's what it really comes down to, folks.